The Korean Mafia boss had a secret black wife. His kids found out at his deathbed. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I hope you are having an amazing day filled with happiness, good health, and a little extra luck wherever life finds you today. Before we begin, may I borrow just 5 seconds of your good fortune by asking you to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications? Your small act of support helps us continue bringing you powerful stories that stay with you long after they end. Thank you so much for watching, for your kindness, and for supporting this channel every step of the way. Now I would love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching this video, and what time is it where you are right now? Settle in, get comfortable, and now let us begin this unforgettable story together. The hardest secrets are never buried underground. They are carried quietly inside the hearts of the people who love us most. The first time Daniel Park's children saw me, their father was lying in a hospital bed, and I was wearing the wedding ring they believed had been buried with their mother years ago. Rain struck the tall windows of the private medical suite overlooking the city, each drop echoing through the silent hallway like a clock counting down precious moments. The mansion had been transformed into a place of quiet medical care, where every room smelled faintly of fresh flowers, warm blankets, and antiseptic instead of polished leather and expensive cigars. Everyone whispered. Everyone waited. No one expected a stranger to arrive. I stepped through the front gate wearing a simple navy coat, my umbrella folded beneath one arm, while my 16-year-old daughter, Maya, walked silently beside me. She held my hand a little tighter than usual. I could feel her nervousness even before she spoke. "Are you sure he wanted us here?" she whispered. I looked toward the glowing windows of the mansion. "He asked for us. That was enough." The security guards exchanged uncertain glances before one of them quietly opened the front door. None of them stopped me. They knew my face even if the family did not. Inside, the enormous entrance hall felt colder than the rain outside. Portraits of generations of the Park family lined the walls beneath crystal chandeliers that reflected soft golden light across polished marble floors. Everything looked powerful. Everything also felt painfully lonely. Before I could walk farther, a tall man stepped into my path. His tailored charcoal suit matched the guarded expression on his face. "Can I help you?" he asked politely. I already knew who he was. Michael Park, Daniel's oldest son. "I am here to see your father," I answered calmly. He studied me for several seconds before shaking his head. "My father's doctors have restricted visitors." I nodded with understanding. "Tell him Grace Holloway is here." His expression did not change. "I am sorry. I do not know anyone by that name." Before I could answer, another voice interrupted from the staircase. A young woman with kind eyes descended slowly, curiosity replacing caution on her face. "Michael, who is she?" "She says she knows Dad." Lauren folded her arms thoughtfully before looking back at me. "Did our father invite you?" "Yes." Michael sighed quietly. Everyone suddenly claims to know powerful men when they become ill. His words were firm but not cruel. He was protecting the only parent he had left. I could not blame him for that. I reached into my handbag but stopped before removing anything. This was not the moment to prove who I was with documents or photographs. Daniel deserved better than having his life explained in an entrance hall. Then the silence broke. A nurse hurried downstairs carrying fresh medication. "Mr. Park is awake," she announced. "He keeps asking for someone named Grace." Every conversation stopped instantly. Michael frowned. Lauren looked at me with growing confusion. Upstairs, a weak but unmistakable voice drifted through the partially open bedroom door. "Bring my wife." Michael's face softened with sadness. "He must be confused," he whispered. "Our mother passed away years ago." The nurse hesitated before speaking again. He repeated it 3 times. I slowly removed my left glove and rested my hand beneath the chandelier's warm light. A simple gold wedding band reflected softly against my skin. Neither expensive nor elaborate, just quietly worn after 8 years of marriage. Lauren noticed it first. Her eyes widened as she stared at the inside engraving that had become visible when I adjusted the ring. Michael followed her gaze, and the color slowly disappeared from his face. For the first time in his life, he looked at me not as a stranger standing outside his father's door, but as a question no one in the family had ever imagined asking. The silence in the entrance hall felt heavier than the rain still falling outside. Michael looked from the wedding band on my hand to my face, searching for an explanation that refused to come. Lauren remained completely still, her eyes fixed on the small engraving inside the ring that neither of them could read from where they stood. Maya quietly moved closer beside me, saying nothing, yet her steady presence gave me the strength to remain calm. I had promised Daniel years ago that if this day ever arrived, I would tell the truth with dignity instead of anger. Upstairs, his weak voice echoed once more through the hallway. Grace. Every person in the house heard it. Michael slowly turned toward the staircase before looking back at me. If my father is asking for you, he said carefully, then you may see him, but I need to understand who you are. I lowered my eyes for a brief moment before answering. You deserve the truth, just not here. He hesitated before stepping aside. We climbed the wide staircase together in complete silence. Family portraits watched from the walls as though generations before us were witnessing the same moment. When I reached the bedroom door, I paused. My heart pounded harder than it had on the day Daniel and I exchanged our vows. The room was warm despite the autumn rain outside. Medical equipment rested quietly beside the large bed, while soft afternoon light filtered through partially closed curtains. Daniel looked older than the man I had kissed goodbye only 2 weeks earlier before his final hospital treatment. His once powerful shoulders had become thinner, yet the intricate tattoos visible above the collar of his white shirt still reminded me of the fearless man who had carried impossible responsibilities for decades. His eyes remained closed until he heard my footsteps. Slowly he opened them. The moment he saw me, every trace of tension disappeared from his face. A gentle smile, small but unmistakable, appeared where only exhaustion had been moments before. He reached toward me with trembling fingers. You came, he whispered. I carefully took his hand in both of mine. I promised I always would. His breathing became steadier almost immediately. The doctor standing quietly near the window exchanged a surprised glance with one of the nurses. Lauren noticed it too. His heart rate is calmer, she whispered. Daniel looked past me toward Maya. Come here, sweetheart. Maya stepped closer to the bedside, and Daniel smiled at her with unmistakable affection. Have you been taking care of your mother? She nodded with tears gathering in her eyes. Every day. He gently squeezed her hand before looking back at me again. I kept the porch light on, he said softly. Tears filled my eyes because those simple words carried 8 years of memories. Every evening, no matter how late he returned from work, he had smiled whenever he saw the warm light waiting for him outside our little house by the lake. It was our silent promise that someone would always be waiting. Behind me, Michael frowned in confusion. What does that mean? He asked quietly. Daniel slowly turned his head toward his son. Even with little strength remaining, his voice became clear enough for everyone in the room to hear. It means she is my home. The room fell completely silent. Lauren covered her mouth as tears began forming in her eyes. Michael stood motionless, unable to reconcile the father he thought he knew with the man lying before him. Before anyone could speak again, Daniel lifted his left hand with visible effort. The wedding band on his finger caught the afternoon light. It matched mine perfectly. No one in the room could deny what they were seeing anymore, yet no one understood how 8 years of marriage had remained invisible to the very family who believed they knew him best. No one spoke for what felt like an entire lifetime. Daniel's hand remained wrapped around mine, while the matching wedding bands reflected softly beneath the afternoon light. Outside, the steady rain continued to fall against the tall windows, but inside the room every sound seemed to disappear. Michael finally found his voice. 8 years, he whispered, almost to himself. How could something this important stay hidden for 8 years? Daniel slowly closed his eyes, exhausted by even the smallest conversation. Before he could answer, the family physician stepped forward with quiet professionalism. Mr. Park needs to rest, he said gently. Please keep any discussions brief. Daniel gave the smallest nod before looking at me once more. The box, he whispered. Please. I understood immediately. Beneath the reading table beside his bed rested a small walnut box that only I knew existed. I carefully lifted it into my hands. The polished wood had become smooth after years of being opened and closed by the same familiar fingers. Michael watched every movement with growing confusion. What is inside? He asked. I looked toward Daniel. He answered with a faint smile. Our life. His strength faded again, and he quietly drifted back to sleep with his hand still resting against mine. The doctor suggested everyone leave the room to allow him time to recover. Reluctantly, I gently released Daniel's hand before carrying the wooden box into the family library. The room smelled of old books and cedar shelves polished over generations. Rain tapped softly against the windows while a fire crackled quietly inside the stone fireplace. Michael closed the door behind us. Lauren stood beside him, her expression no longer guarded but deeply uncertain. Maya remained close to me, silently holding my arm. I placed the walnut box on the large oak table and slowly lifted the lid. The first item inside was a folded marriage certificate protected inside a clear sleeve. Michael reached for it with trembling hands. His eyes widened as he read the official seal, the signatures, and the date from 8 years earlier. This cannot be real, he murmured. Lauren gently took the document from him and carefully examined every page. It is legally recorded, she whispered. Everything is authentic. Beneath the certificate rested a simple photograph. Daniel stood beside me on the wooden porch of our small lakeside home. Maya, only 8 years old then, sat on the front steps laughing while Daniel held a paintbrush covered in bright blue paint. He had spent the entire afternoon helping her repaint an old birdhouse after she insisted birds deserved colorful homes too. Michael stared at the photograph for several long moments. I have never seen my father dressed like this, he said quietly. Daniel wore blue jeans, a faded gray sweater, and old work boots. There were no expensive watches, no security guards, and no signs of the powerful businessman the world recognized. He looked relaxed, happy, human. One photograph became another. Birthdays, Christmas dinners, autumn walks beside the lake, family breakfasts on the porch. Maya proudly holding a fishing pole while Daniel applauded as though she had won an Olympic medal. Every image revealed a life his children had never imagined existed. Lauren brushed a tear from her cheek before picking up a small velvet pouch hidden beneath the photographs. Inside rested a tiny silver key attached to a handwritten label. Lake House. Michael looked at me with questions filling his eyes. Did my father really live there? I nodded softly. Whenever he could. Before anyone spoke again, another folded envelope slipped from beneath the photographs and landed quietly on the table. Across the front, written in Daniel's unmistakable handwriting, were 4 simple words that immediately stole every breath from the room. For Michael and Lauren. Michael stared at the unopened envelope as though simply touching it might change everything he believed about his father. The familiar handwriting across the front carried a weight no legal document ever could. Lauren gently slid the letter toward him. You should open it, she whispered. He hesitated before carefully breaking the seal. The room remained completely silent except for the soft rain tapping against the library windows and the steady crackling of the fireplace nearby. Michael unfolded the pages with trembling hands and slowly began reading aloud. My dear Michael and Lauren, if you are reading this letter, then I was never brave enough to tell you these words while I was still strong enough to stand before you. That failure belongs to me alone. Please do not let it become Grace's burden. Michael stopped reading for a moment, swallowing hard before continuing. You may wonder why I chose silence instead of honesty. The answer is not because I loved either family more. It is because I was afraid that asking you to accept another chapter of my life would make you believe I was trying to replace the beautiful memories of your mother. Grace never asked me to hide her. She asked me many times to tell you the truth. Every birthday, every holiday, every time I drove away from the lake house, she reminded me that children deserve honesty more than comfort. Lauren quietly covered her mouth as tears slipped down her cheeks. I lowered my eyes because those conversations returned to me with painful clarity. Countless evenings I had begged Daniel to invite his children for dinner, to let them know they had another place where they would always be welcomed. Every single time he smiled sadly and answered, "Soon." Michael continued reading. "If you have met Maya, then you already know the greatest joy of my later years. She never called me father because I never asked her to. She simply chose to trust me, and that trust healed parts of me I thought were gone forever. Grace taught me that family is not built by blood or power. It is built every ordinary day by showing up, keeping promises, and leaving the porch light on for someone who is coming home." The final sentence left Michael unable to speak. Lauren gently accepted the letter and finished reading the last paragraph herself. "If there is one final gift I ask of you, it is this. Judge Grace only after you have seen the life we built together. If you still believe she does not belong in this family, I will accept your decision. But at least let your judgment come from truth instead of silence." No one moved for several long moments. Finally, Lauren reached for the small silver key resting beside the photographs. "The lake house," she whispered. "We need to see it." Michael slowly nodded. Less than an hour later, the four of us drove through winding country roads until the city disappeared behind rows of maple trees glowing with autumn colors. The small lakeside cottage came into view beside calm water reflecting the cloudy afternoon sky. There were no security cameras, no stone gates, and no symbols of Daniel's enormous influence. A white porch swing rested quietly beneath hanging flower baskets, while a single lantern remained mounted beside the front door. I unlocked the door with the silver key and stepped inside. The living room smelled faintly of cedar wood, coffee, and old books. Family photographs covered nearly every shelf. Maya's school drawings decorated the refrigerator with colorful magnets. A knitted blanket rested across the sofa exactly where Daniel had left it only 2 weeks earlier. Michael slowly walked through the room, touching the back of an old wooden chair before stopping beside a framed photograph sitting on the fireplace mantel. It showed Daniel laughing as he burned pancakes in a tiny kitchen while Maya and I laughed so hard we could barely stand. Michael stared at the picture for a long time before quietly saying the words none of us expected to hear. "I have never seen my father look this happy." The little lake house remained completely still as afternoon sunlight slowly pushed through the rain clouds. Michael wandered from room to room without speaking, touching ordinary things his father had once used every day. An old ceramic coffee mug rested beside the sink. A pair of reading glasses lay open on the kitchen table next to a half-finished crossword puzzle. A worn fishing hat hung quietly beside the back door. None of those things belonged to the powerful man whose photograph appeared on magazine covers. They belonged to someone who had finally found a place where he did not have to pretend. Lauren opened the refrigerator and smiled through her tears. Colorful drawings covered nearly every inch of the door. Maya's report cards, handwritten grocery lists, birthday cards, and small notes decorated the surface with magnets shaped like birds and flowers. One faded note caught her attention. It read, "Do not forget strawberries. Maya says pancakes taste happier with them." Lauren gently removed the note and stared at the familiar handwriting. "Dad wrote this?" she whispered. I nodded. Every Saturday morning he made pancakes, even when they turned out a little crooked. Maya laughed softly. He always pretended the funny shapes were intentional. Michael looked around the small kitchen with quiet disbelief. "He never cooked when we were children," he admitted. "He always said he was too busy." I walked toward the old coffee maker sitting beside the window. "He learned here," I answered gently. The first pancake he made was almost impossible to recognize. Maya smiled. I told him it looked like the state of Texas. For the first time since we met, Michael laughed. It was brief, almost reluctant, but real. The sound seemed to surprise even him. Later, Lauren discovered a bookshelf filled with carefully labeled photo albums. She carried the first one to the living room, and all four of us gathered around the coffee table. Every page revealed another ordinary day. Daniel planting tomatoes beside Maya. Daniel repainting the porch swing with blue paint covering his hands. Daniel helping me hang tiny lights around the front porch before Christmas. Daniel asleep in an old armchair while Maya quietly placed a blanket over his shoulders. None of the photographs looked staged. They looked lived. Michael slowly turned another page before stopping at a picture taken beside the lake during sunset. Daniel sat on the dock while Maya leaned against his shoulder reading a book aloud. Across the bottom of the photograph, Daniel had written one simple sentence in blue ink. My favorite evenings never needed an audience. Michael lowered the album and covered his eyes for a moment. I spent years believing my father loved business more than family, he said quietly. Now I realize he was searching for peace wherever he could find it. I shook my head gently. He loved you more than you know. Michael looked at me with quiet confusion. Then why did he never bring us here? Before I could answer, Lauren discovered another envelope tucked inside the final page of the album. This one was addressed only to Grace. She carefully handed it to me without opening it. My hands trembled as I unfolded the familiar paper. Daniel's words were written with the same steady handwriting I had loved for years. If you are reading this beside Michael and Lauren, then they finally know the truth. Please tell them I never stayed away because I stopped loving them. I stayed away because someone convinced me that bringing both parts of my life together would destroy them all. Michael immediately looked up. Someone convinced him? He repeated. The peaceful silence inside the little lake house disappeared at once. For the first time, all of us realized there might be another secret hidden beneath the one we had only just uncovered. Some lies are spoken with words. The most dangerous ones are protected by silence. None of us left the lake house immediately. Daniel's final letter rested quietly on the coffee table while the afternoon sun slowly disappeared behind gathering clouds. Michael read the final paragraph again. His voice calmer now but filled with questions. Someone convinced me that bringing both parts of my life together would destroy them all. He looked directly at me. Did my father ever tell you who that person was? I slowly shook my head. He never said a name. Every time I asked, he simply told me that some promises become prisons when people are afraid. Lauren quietly walked toward the bookshelf once more. There has to be something else. She began searching every shelf carefully, not like someone hunting for evidence, but like a daughter trying to understand the father she suddenly realized she had never fully known. Maya silently joined her while Michael wandered into Daniel's small study overlooking the lake. It was hardly larger than a guest bedroom. A simple oak desk faced the water. Family photographs stood beside neatly arranged notebooks. A faded baseball rested on one corner of the desk. Michael picked it up and smiled sadly. Dad taught me how to throw a fastball when I was 10. It was the first happy childhood memory he had spoken aloud all day. As he placed the baseball back on the desk, he noticed one drawer that refused to close completely. Inside rested several neatly organized folders tied together with a dark blue ribbon. The first folder contained copies of birthday cards addressed to Michael and Lauren. None of them had ever been mailed. Every envelope carried the correct address. Every stamp had already been attached. Lauren carefully opened one dated 5 years earlier. Happy birthday, sweetheart. I wanted to celebrate with you today, but I was told you did not wish to see me. She looked up immediately. I never said that. Michael quickly opened another. Michael, I heard you accepted your promotion. I wanted to take you to dinner, but I was informed you were traveling overseas. He lowered the letter slowly. I was home that entire week. We exchanged confused glances before searching the remaining folders together. The pattern repeated itself over and over. Invitations never delivered. Family dinners quietly canceled. Holiday visits postponed without explanation. Every letter ended with hope instead of bitterness. Daniel always believed there would be another opportunity. Beneath the final folder rested a leather appointment book. Lauren carefully opened it. Every canceled meeting carried the same handwritten initials beside it. R.H. Michael stared at the page before quietly whispering, Richard Hayes. The name settled over the room like an unexpected storm. Richard Hayes had served as Daniel's senior advisor for more than 20 years. He managed schedules, private correspondence, and nearly every personal appointment. Michael slowly sat down in his father's chair, unable to hide the disbelief in his voice. Richard always told us Dad was too busy. He told Dad we were unavailable. I felt my heart sink as countless painful memories suddenly made sense. Every family dinner Daniel believed his children had declined. Every birthday he quietly spent wondering why they stayed away. Every evening I watched him stand on our porch looking toward the road before forcing himself to smile and come back inside. Maya gently reached for my hand. Lauren closed the appointment book with trembling fingers. "Someone did not just hide a marriage," she whispered. "Someone spent years keeping a father away from his own children." At that exact moment Michael's cell phone vibrated. The caller identification displayed the name Richard Hayes. Michael looked at the screen for several long seconds before answering. Richard's calm voice came through the speaker. "Mr. Park has regained consciousness. He is asking for all of you immediately. He says there is one final truth that cannot wait any longer." Hope has a quiet voice, but regret remembers every word left unsaid. We returned to the mansion just as evening settled over the city. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the stone pathways glistening beneath soft golden lights. No one spoke during the drive. Michael held Daniel's letters tightly in his lap, while Lauren carefully carried the walnut box that had quietly changed all of our lives. Maya sat beside me, resting her head against my shoulder. As we entered the house, the familiar silence felt different now. It was no longer filled with suspicion. It was filled with unanswered questions waiting for one final truth. The family physician met us at the front entrance with a relieved smile. "He is awake," he said softly. "He has been asking for all of you." Richard Hayes stood several feet away near the grand staircase, dressed as perfectly as ever, his calm expression revealing nothing. 4 years he had been the trusted advisor who organized every schedule, every meeting, and every personal appointment. Michael looked at him for a long moment before quietly saying, "We will speak later." Richard simply nodded without showing surprise. Daniel's bedroom was peaceful when we entered. The evening light filtered gently through the curtains, while a small lamp illuminated the room with a warm glow. Daniel slowly opened his eyes as each of us stepped closer. His tired face softened when he saw all 4 of us standing together. For the first time in many years, his entire family occupied the same room. He smiled with quiet relief. "Thank you," he whispered. Michael walked to the bedside first. Without speaking, he placed the unopened letters gently beside his father's hand. Daniel looked at them, then slowly closed his eyes. "You found them." Michael nodded. "We read every one." Tears gathered in Daniel's eyes. "I wrote many more than I ever mailed." Lauren gently rested her hand over his. "Dad, why did you believe we did not want to see you?" Daniel took a slow breath before answering. "Because every time I asked Richard to arrange a dinner, a birthday, or a holiday together, he returned with the same answer. He told me both of you needed more time. He said introducing Grace would only deepen your grief after losing your mother. I believed waiting would protect everyone." Michael lowered his head, overwhelmed by the realization that years of distance had been built upon words neither side had ever spoken. "We were told you were too busy," he admitted quietly. Daniel looked toward the ceiling for a long moment before whispering, "Then we were all living inside the same lie." Richard quietly entered the room after the physician invited him inside. His expression remained composed, but the confidence he had carried for decades seemed noticeably smaller. Daniel turned his eyes toward him. "Richard," he said gently, "did you truly believe separating my family was the right thing to do?" Richard lowered his gaze. "I believed I was protecting your legacy. I feared that revealing a second marriage would divide the family and damage everything you had spent your life building." Daniel slowly shook his head. "A legacy built upon silence is never protected. It is only delayed." No one raised a voice. No accusations filled the room. Michael simply stepped toward Richard and spoke with calm certainty. "Tomorrow morning your responsibilities with our family will come to an end. Our attorneys will review every decision that kept these letters from reaching us. Richard quietly nodded. He offered no excuses before leaving the room alone. Daniel looked back at me. I gently took his hand once more. He smiled with unmistakable gratitude before lifting my fingers to his lips and placing the lightest kiss upon them. The same quiet gesture he had repeated every anniversary for 8 years. Then he looked toward Michael, Lauren, and Maya standing together beside the bed. His tired smile grew a little stronger. "Now," he whispered, "my family finally looks the way I always dreamed it would. The greatest gift a person can leave behind is not money. It is the truth that finally sets everyone free." Morning sunlight slowly replaced the long night outside the mansion, filling Daniel's bedroom with a soft golden glow. The storm had passed, and for the first time in days the windows stood open just enough to let fresh autumn air drift gently through the room. Daniel seemed more peaceful than he had since we arrived. His breathing remained slow, but his eyes were clear. The doctor quietly explained that no one knew how long this moment of strength would last. Daniel smiled faintly after hearing those words. "Long enough," he whispered. "Long enough to finish what I should have done years ago." Michael, Lauren, Maya, and I gathered around his bed. No one stood apart anymore. The invisible wall that had separated us for years had quietly disappeared during the long night. Daniel looked at each of us before speaking. "There is something I need all of you to understand." His voice was weak, yet every word carried quiet certainty. "Grace never asked me to hide our marriage. She never asked me for my name, my money, or my influence. The only thing she ever asked was that I stop living two separate lives." I lowered my eyes as tears quietly gathered. Daniel gently reached for my hand again. "She spent 8 years waiting for me to become brave enough." He turned toward Michael and Lauren. "Every birthday, every holiday, every family celebration, she reminded me that you were my children first. She wanted you at our table more than she wanted privacy." Lauren quietly wiped away a tear. "Then why did you never tell us?" Daniel looked toward the ceiling before answering with complete honesty. "Because fear can become a habit. At first I believed I was protecting everyone. Later I realized I was only protecting myself from difficult conversations." The room became silent once more. Maya stepped closer to the bed, holding something in her hands. It was the little blue birdhouse Daniel had helped her paint years earlier. The paint had faded slightly, but it remained carefully preserved. "I brought this," she said softly. "I thought you might want to see it again." Daniel smiled with unmistakable warmth. "Did the birds ever come back?" Maya nodded proudly. "Every spring." He laughed quietly. "Then we built it well." Michael looked at the little birdhouse before turning back to his father. "Dad," he said gently, "I spent years believing you chose another family instead of us." Daniel slowly shook his head. "Never. My greatest mistake was believing I had to choose at all." Michael reached across the bed and carefully took his father's hand. It was the first time since childhood that either of them had done so. "You do not have to carry that mistake anymore," he said. "We know the truth now." Lauren stepped beside him and placed her hand over theirs. After a brief hesitation, I added mine, and Maya quietly completed the circle. Daniel looked at our joined hands with peaceful disbelief. "This," he whispered, "is the family I prayed would one day stand together." He closed his eyes for a brief moment before opening them again. "Promise me something." We all nodded. "Do not let this house become another place where people hide behind silence. Eat together. Celebrate together. Argue if you must, but never stop talking to one another." His words settled deeply into every heart in the room. As the morning light grew brighter, a small bird landed on the windowsill just outside the open window. It sang only once before flying toward the gardens below. Daniel watched it disappear into the clear autumn sky, and a peaceful smile slowly spread across his face. "The porch light," he whispered one final time. I gently squeezed his hand and smiled through my tears. "It will always be waiting for you." The porch light stayed on that evening. It glowed softly against the quiet darkness surrounding the mansion, just as it had outside our little lake house for countless nights before. Daniel passed away peacefully a few hours after sunrise, surrounded not by silence, but by every person he had spent years trying to bring together. He never struggled. He simply looked at each of us one last time, smiled with gentle gratitude, and quietly closed his eyes while our hands remained joined around his. The room became perfectly still. No one spoke because no words could have honored that moment better than the peace resting upon his face. Several days later, family and close friends gathered for a private memorial overlooking Lake Michigan. The ceremony was simple because that was exactly what Daniel had asked for in a letter the attorney read aloud. There were no grand displays of wealth, no elaborate speeches about power, and no celebration of business achievements. Instead, photographs from the little lake house stood beside fresh white flowers. One picture showed Daniel laughing while burning pancakes. Another captured him teaching Maya how to bait a fishing line without ever losing his patience. Another showed him sitting quietly on the porch beside me while autumn leaves drifted across the yard. Michael stood before everyone and took a slow breath. "For many years," he said calmly, "I believed my father had hidden part of his life because he was ashamed of it. I know now that he hid it because fear convinced him that protecting people sometimes meant separating them. He was wrong about that, but he never stopped loving any of us." He turned toward me before continuing. "Today I would like to introduce someone who should never have been introduced this late. This is my father's wife. She is part of our family." Tears quietly filled my eyes as every person present rose to their feet. Not because anyone instructed them to do so, but because respect often arrives without being requested. Lauren walked over and gently embraced me. "I lost my father," she whispered, "but I found family I never knew I had." I held her tightly, grateful that forgiveness had arrived before regret became permanent. After the memorial ended, all of us drove together to the little lake house. Nothing inside had changed. Daniel's favorite coffee mug still rested beside the sink. His reading glasses remained on the kitchen table. The blue birdhouse still hung beside the porch where several small birds had already begun building another nest. Michael smiled as he looked around the familiar rooms. "I think this place should stay exactly as it is," he said. Lauren nodded. "It feels like he is still reminding us to slow down." Maya carefully placed the little blue birdhouse back where Daniel always liked it. "The birds came home again," she said happily. "So should we." From that day forward, the lake house became our gathering place. Birthdays were celebrated around the old wooden table. Thanksgiving dinners filled the kitchen with laughter. Christmas mornings began with pancakes that still came out crooked from time to time, and every single Saturday someone remembered to buy strawberries because Daniel had once written that pancakes tasted happier with them. 1 year later, just before sunset, the four of us stood together on the porch overlooking the calm lake. Michael quietly switched on the porch light as evening settled across the water. He looked at me with a warm smile. "I finally understand why Dad never wanted that light turned off." I slipped my hand gently over my wedding band before looking toward the glowing porch. "Because home is not the place where someone arrives," I answered softly. "Home is the place that keeps waiting for them." At that moment, Lauren wrapped one arm around my shoulders while Maya leaned comfortably against me. We stood together watching the golden light reflect across the lake until the first stars appeared above us. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, feeling Daniel's quiet promise surrounding us once more. Then I opened them again, smiled toward the porch light shining faithfully in the gathering night, and gently kissed the tips of my fingers before resting them against my wedding band, knowing that love had never truly been his greatest secret. The family he spent his life protecting had finally become the family he always dreamed would stand together.